Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. And you guys know my habit and my custom is to welcome our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things very expensive in my world, and that is time. Time is one of the most precious commodity given to man, offered to every single man, rich and poor, same quantity. What we do with that time tells us how much we are in love with time, how we respect time, or if we disrespect time. And your life will show the fruit of it. The other is the journey. The journey housed some powerful stuff. It made the person who they are today. And we have Catherine coming before us, and we want to honor her for coming and sharing both of these precious commodity with us here at Threads of Enlightenment. Catherine, thank you so much for coming and visiting.
Thank you for having me on this morning. Great to meet you.
It is an honor. Tell the folks how you serve, because I tell them that is such an honorable position to be in life, to be there because you want to be there all day long, every day of your life when you get there. Tell them, how do you serve mankind?
I am Catherine Duncan, integrative spiritual consultant. I have a private practice called Learning to Live, where I work with people emotionally and spiritually, people who are going through transition, wanting more. Maybe they're going through grief, loss, just trying to find deeper meaning in their life. And I also do quite a bit of public speaking, and now I'm a first-time author. My book, Everyday Awakening, came out nationwide in July.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Just so exciting. But my background, I'm a ordained minister. I'm a board certified chaplain. I'm a certified spiritual director, and just been really passionate about whole person healing for the last 25 years studying it, and I'm trained in a range of healing modalities. So I'm just passionate about working with people, helping people come into their heart, their soul, to find their essence and live from there.
Beautiful, honorable position to be in, because and I cannot wait to get into your story. Our custom here is to revisit life, if you will, go back into that time capsule and revisit when we were young. Mom and dad kissed us in the hospital, put us in that car, drove us home, threw us in the crib, and they now are going to begin to deposit information, data into you and to I. And as we collect the data, we are dancing with their beliefs, we're dancing with their energies, we're dancing with all of those things while we're there in that space called home. Invite us to your home and let us get a window, if you will. How was it?
I am the youngest of 6 kids. And I write about this in my book. My parents, my mother was a nurse, and then when she had 6 kids, she stopped working. My father was this consummate entrepreneur. He was a complicated man. On one hand, all he wanted was the best for us and supporting us in every way. On the other hand, he was running several companies and under tremendous pressure, and would come home at night. My memories of my childhood, come home at night and take out his angst and anger on me and some of my siblings. And so my childhood, my first 10 years of my life, I remember just some real unrest of just discomfort, unrest with my father and the role that he played in our family. And that, I think, truly led to, at age 10, turning 11, I was suddenly very sick and diagnosed with a life-threatening cancer, actually, and given a 20% chance to live. And as I've done my work as an adult, I look back now and on some hand, not surprised that it led to me feeling like I almost wanted to leave this earth, and was given a choice.
That is an early start, if you will.
Yeah, very.
So here you are deathly ill, and the choice that was given to you, what did it look like when it presented to you?
When I was diagnosed with having this very rare form of childhood cancer, I remember being with my parents in the hospital and they told me I had never heard the word before. I thought, oh, I'd have to go to the hospital and have a Tylenol, or, I just had never heard
Yeah.
of it. But then once I started really intensive, chemotherapy, radiation, had multiple surgeries. And then this is in the 70s. And back in the 70s, they didn't have any kind of special attention care for children in any way. It was really austere. It was a pretty rough environment. And I quickly could feel that I was walking on a tightrope between life and death. I could feel it. I felt like I was looking over the edge of the cliff. And that's when, out of nowhere, this came through me. I wanted to live. And
Hmm.
the strong feeling of wanting to live came through me. And then that's when I also started to pray, and prayer also had meant nothing to me. My family, Lutheran, we occasionally went to church, but out of nowhere, and I told no one, I just started to pray, could I live to be 20? I thought if I could live to be 20, I would see the world. And that's how my story began.
Here you are, this young girl, and you'd mentioned earlier this her age is at 11 years old when this began, and you had your battle, and you're there, and you realize that you're on this fence, if you will, life and death, and you had a decision to make, and you choose life. And once you chose life, what did you do? Because there's a scripture in the Bible that says life and death is before you, and it says choose life. But some of us crazy people choose the other way. So talk to us when you choose life and you made the bargain. If I can get past 20, I'll be good. So you began to do your negotiation at a young age. When you choose life, what was that process like when you began to move towards life and not death?
It's interesting that out of nowhere, again, as I said, I started to pray to live to be 20. I just thought if I could just get to 20. And I just kept praying it. And um interestingly, my mother, I'd say more religious, not spiritual, she would say, you're going to be fine. And
Yeah,
that was comforting, but there was no sense of reality of what was happening. And no one was talking to me about what I was actually going through.
yeah,
And not long after praying and praying and praying, all of a sudden, one day, this feeling of peace just like flooded
yeah,
through my body. It was just like, ugh. I mean, I almost took my breath away. In that moment, it just a knowing came deeply through me that I was going to be okay and I was going to live. And I just leaned into it. I felt it. I held it in my heart. I told the whole experience. I never told anyone,
yeah.
but it gave me so much comfort in a time when I felt so lonely and it was so frightening. And then all of a sudden, this comfort was with me. And I started in my mind to call it God and talk to God and pray to God. And that feeling has been with me to this day.
Ah, that's beautiful. And you mentioned one of the things that I know, and again, on the onset of our conversation, I mentioned that my mom was a nurse. I have sisters, nurse. I have all my family are in the hospital in some way, shape, or form. And we always would talk about some of the things that we notice, especially when people um, are sick and so forth. How many of them are so have a sense of loneliness. It's incredible when they're going through this, and in some cases because they don't have a family member there or that is caring enough to just sit down and so forth. So I've seen some of that, as you said, that lonely feeling and how you want to um, be there for that individual. Here's this girl. She's gone through, she's got this peace now and a knowing along with the peace. And she begins to now navigate in life. She's growing up. How did that peace and knowing that you were well, how did it start manifesting in your body as you are moving day after day?
Well, so grateful, of course, that I got through that whole intense couple of years of really intensive treatment. Interestingly, I'll share that the year I got sick, a drug came over from Turkey that was randomly being given to children, and my father demanded they give me this drug. This drug is now standard treatment for what I went through. The survival rate, which was 20%, is now 80% for what I lived
Oh,
through. So I see the part my father played in this. But so I got through all the treatments as a teenager, started to live a pretty normal life. But here's how it started coming through. I started really wanting and searching, like, why am I alive? What does it mean to be here? I started reading books as a teenager. Instead of going to parties on the weekend, I would sit home and I'd read Existentialism and Human Emotions by Jean-Paul Sartre. I'd read,
yeah,
Who is Man by Abraham Heschel. I started reading these really intense books because I was searching, like,
yeah,
trying to get my head around it. I wasn't ready to do any kind of therapy of any kind to look inward, but I was reading and reading and
yeah,
reading.
yeah. At
Went through,
such a young age, though,
I
Catherine, at such a
know,
young age.
I
What
know I still have the books earmarked from being a teenager reading all these books.
And was it that experience of life and death and stuff and the peace? What was it precisely? Was it the peace that came on that made you an adventurous seeker in an information or a data seeker to find out what happened? Was it that? Do you remember what was the catalyst? I know it's usually pieces that come together and then there's something that happens that kind of seals it. Do you remember what it was that sealed it and sent you off on this course there? You just wanted to be ravenous with your mind grabbing data.
Mm-hmm. Such a wonderful question. And I have to say, up to through today, I read thousands of books in this
Yeah.
genre because I just love it. I just feel like, oh, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
But back then as a teenager, I think deep within and maybe even almost more subconscious was, why am I alive? Like,
Yeah.
what does it mean to be alive?
Yeah.
What does it mean? And there was just a fire within me. And then I went high school, college, and after college, all my family, all my siblings, everyone was in the business world. So of course I went into business. I went into advertising, and it was fun. And I worked for Time Magazine
Yeah.
as senior advertising executive, and all that was fun. But I'll tell you, 6, 7, 8 years plus working for Time Magazine, I started to feel in my being. And I had this prayer practice where I just was always communicating with
Yeah.
God, talking to God. And that was such a big part of my life. And I'd go on these business trips and I'd bring stacks of books on spirituality and life and meaning. And my colleagues would be like, what are you reading? They almost made fun of me. But I started feeling this gnawing in me, like, I don't think this is my path, even though it's so fun. And I'd fly on Times Jet and we'd have
Yeah.
all these lucrative trips and all this. But I was like, this isn't it. And so I made a big turn in my 30s to, here's the thing, be careful what you pray for.
Oh, now you're finding that out. I keep telling people, someone is listening. People are listening.
Get it deeper.
Someone's listening to you and going to give you what you're asking for. It's just a matter of time. The situations has to be put in place to execute what you're asking for, but it'll show up. So here you are, this girl, this woman, actually, she is, and I love that you had mentioned it because I tell people this is how you know that you're not in the right space. There is a underlying under on restlessness. There's an
Yeah.
underlying restlessness that
Yeah.
is within you, and it doesn't matter how many. Um, if it's the man, the women, the money, the alcohol, it doesn't matter. The power, everything. But there's this underlying restlessness that is calling to you, and you will never be able to subsided unless you keep taking more drugs, more alcohol, more of everything to try and quiet that voice. But as much as you drink and as much drug that you take, it will get louder because there is an assignment for you and
Right.
you're being called. So here you are, you're feeling the restlessness, and you are looking at your life and you decide, let me redirect where I'm going. When you made that decision, what was your world like? Your that morning, the days of the weeks of when you were dancing in your mind about what to do and
Mhm.
why to do it.
I'll share with you also that in my middle 20s, just as that restlessness, just speaking to that for a moment, I actually started to have nightmares. I started to have nightmares where I would sit up in bed suddenly thinking I was taking my last breath and I was going to die.
Yeah,
And it kept happening and happening. And it was a real knowing within me, like, if I don't process what I went through as a child, it's going to eat me up. I mean,
yeah,
so then I did start the path of a therapist and working with a therapist. But I just also want to say, as it relates to working with a therapist, I had a few therapists at the beginning who I controlled them. And
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
oh, that wasn't working too well. And finally, I had this great therapist named Kevin who was amazing. And he's like, if we're not going to talk about your childhood, I'm not going to see you. And I was like, good for you that you push me.
Yeah, I always tell people find someone who has been through some stuff, and I try telling them because they will peg you. They will know when you're just playing around because they are familiar with the playing around. Because guess what, they did it many years before you
Yeah.
even showed up. So
Yeah.
they know it because they've been through it. So here you are. You found Kevin, and Kevin now is going to begin to help you to unmask you. As you
Yep.
began to unmask, what did you discover as
Mm.
you were having these conversations and the probing questions that he was leveling at you to cause you to go back in and excavate what was there?
Yeah.
What did
I
you
mean,
discover?
we unearthed what I walked through as a child. And trust me, it wasn't all easy. It was really like it took courage and strength to unearth it. But by doing that, I brought
Yeah,
it into the front of my brain. I was able to integrate it and heal from it. So that was years of working with Kevin. But going back to your question about what was the turning point, or I knew in my being that working with Time Magazine, even though it was fun,
yeah.
it just wasn't it. And the turning point, a couple of them, I turned down a management position with Time Magazine, which you don't do. I mean, they had given me a management position. I turned it down. And, and that was kind of the beginning of the end. But I actually, and I write about this in my book, I had what you'd call a near death experience, whitewater rafting in
Yeah.
Costa Rica in my middle 30s with Time Magazine, a timing trip.
Wow.
And after that experience, I'm like, I'm done. And I gave
Yeah.
my notes within a couple weeks. I thought, this isn't who I want to be. I need space to listen where God's calling me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life and death. We keep choosing that death thing.
Yeah.
As I said before, we got some crazy ones, and I was one of those, man. He says there's just two things before you, and it's basically because we're running. We're not ready to face what's there, and that call. He wants to have that conversation with us because, as I said, he has an assignment for us. But most of all, he wants us to get to know who we are and how great we are, and what powerhouse we are, and how he's ready to be there to help us to know who we are so that
Mm-hmm.
we can do the things that the assignment. I tell everyone on this planet came with an assignment. If you want to do it or not is all up to you. And then I would
Mm-hmm.
go through all history and everyone that came with an assignment. And so as you had made your decision to go and seek out that assignment, what is it, and so forth, as you had that near-death experience for the third time, and you're now moving through. What happened when you made that decision, Catherine? Because you just don't make that decision. And I tell people it is the key. This is one of the keys in personal growth. You must make a decision. And that life decision that you will make will begin to propel you to take actions now to fulfill that decision. But that decision comes from deep inside. It doesn't come from just on the top of your head. It comes from deep inside, and you will know it. And when you make that decision, you'll change your life. What happened? You made it. What did you begin to do from that point on?
I I agree with everything you're saying. It was a deep knowing, a deep feeling that I was done with the job. I knew it and felt it in my gut.
Yeah,
And so I gave my notice, and I think they were shocked that I
as
was
always. Yeah,
leaving a really successful career. And I really, what came through me is I just needed space. I needed to be in the moment. I needed to listen. I needed to sense, feel, hear where I was being guided.
yeah.
And so I left Time Magazine, and then my husband at the time had a small startup internet company with some guys, and I joined them for some consulting, and it was awful. It was just like so boring. I was like, yikes. Um, and interestingly, a few months into this, a girlfriend late at night, out of nowhere, said on the phone to me, we're talking on the phone, and she's like, have you ever thought of studying theology or spiritual direction, given, the hundreds of books I've been reading,
Yeah,
right? And I
yeah.
never thought of it. It was like this angel saying, have you ever thought of this? And
Yeah,
also, I'm like, wow. And I started looking into graduate programs for theology, spiritual direction. And she even mentioned St. Catherine and the university here in Minnesota. And
yeah.
I looked into programs, I got all materials, but when I got the materials from St. Catherine in the mail and I held them in my hands, my body started physically shaking.
Wow.
It was just like a knowing, like,
Yeah.
I think I want to be going here. And I applied, I got in, and then I went out to tell my parents, here my father being the businessman he is,
Yeah.
that I not only quit Time Magazine, but I'm going to study theology. And I write a snippet of this in my book, but it was a coming a day moment because he started screaming, yelling at me in front of my 7-year-old son. And he thought I said geology. And I'm like, no, it's theology. I was like a letting go, like he doesn't get it. It's okay.
Yeah.
And, let that go. It's still brazen in my son's mind. Grandpa's screaming at me about studying theology. And then a few, month plus later, I'm in graduate school. I go back out to tell him, well, hey, I'm in school now. And my mom cracked open, and then my father's been gone 15 years, but he did become my biggest supporter before he died.
That is beautiful. I love this story. When, these seemingly unseemingly things happen to us that say, your friend just happened to say, ask you a question. And that question, after you've been studying the subject for so many years, you had never even thought about it. And I
I've never.
tell people that, though, that's exactly how it works with a true coach. A coach is the guide. They will ask you that question, and you've been living that life for so
Mhm.
long, you will say the same thing. I've never thought about it.
I.
And that little thing there is going to change your life. And
Mhm.
so it is very important that and I've always tell them, listen to your coach, because your coach is your guide. They know how to locate you, if you will, by those questions that they're asking from the conversation that they're there. And what they do, their responsibility is to guide you out of where you are.
Mhm.
And they will ask you those questions, just seem unseemingly, but it's
Mhm.
perfect for the situation. So here you are. You had dad and mom looking at you as you lost your mind. You felt that power once you held the paperwork that this is your right place to be. And you're in there now. And you have accumulated all this knowledge from 11 years old that you got, been reading, your friends, everybody thinks you're nuts. Now you're sitting in this place that you feel you're absolutely, this is it. What was it like when you got there?
Oh gosh, when I started school, the first class, history of Christian spirituality, reading saints and mystics. And when I started reading the books, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm looking for. So I was reading Teresa of Avila, all the mystics,
Yeah.
Julian of Norwich, John of the Cross. I'm like, I'm home. I'm home,
Yeah.
man. It's amazing.
That is awesome. So you
Yeah.
feel home. What did
Yeah.
it do
That's
to you, though? What did it do? What did home, you said it feel like home. What did feeling like home do to you?
I felt reading these old mystics and saints, I felt like these are my people.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things I've been thinking and feeling since a young child. And then
Yeah.
I'm reading about it. I'm reading these people having similar. My mystical abilities, I'm a mystic, and
Yeah.
I see spirits. I hear a lot. I get a lot. And then I'm reading about mystics and I'm like, my people. Just like it was comforting. It was
Yeah.
comforting, affirming. It just opened me up even more and opened my heart more and opened me to even listening on a deeper level.
How did it affect your relationship with others? Now you're here, you're home, and you're with your people, as you say, and you're being changed. And as this change is happening to you, how did you begin to, how did it affect your relationships with others?
I'm happy to say that my husband, Scott, amazing, has been along for the whole ride.
Yeah.
On our first date, when we were, if you can even believe it, we went to high school together, but didn't like each other. So we met after college, but on our very first date, he knew my background and what I'd lived through. And here I was in the business world, and he said, someday you're going to do something to help people. And I thought, oh, no, because I was in high and right along. So when to leave a very successful corporate job to study theology, to have his support is amazing. A lot of probably
Yeah.
partners would be, I don't think so, to
Yeah.
give up that
Yeah.
kind of money I did some consulting on the side, but so he just been so supportive all along. I will say some of my family, my siblings, they fully support me, I feel now, but at
Yeah.
first it was an adjustment. I mean, when I
Yeah.
called all of them to tell them I'm Left Time Magazine, I'm going to study theology, it was just dead silence on the phone. They just didn't, I had nothing. I got nothing. But friendship wise, interestingly, since I was a young person, I always gravitated to, for example, older women were my friends. I
Yeah.
just, so that, and deep thinkers, spiritual. So that all was always in alignment.
Well, Jesus said the prophet has no honor in his own house, so you're in good company.
Yeah.
So here you are, you're home. You told the family, everyone is looking at you like you lost your mind, and you're relating to people, and you're moving through life, and you're gaining your knowledge and so forth, and you're gaining insight as to who you are. Now, how did you begin? And I know. Because of your studies, but how did you begin? What was your first hospice visit like when you were heading in that direction? What was that first encounter like when you got there? What did it do to you?
Well, starting graduate school, I had this vision. I thought, oh, I'll be a spiritual director. That's what I'll do. And I
Yeah.
did. I got certified as a spiritual director. I started out as a spiritual director. And a really huge turning point on my path was when I finished graduate school and I was working as a spiritual director. My mother-in-law, 65, suddenly gravely ill, pancreatic cancer. There was nothing they could do. My father-in-law asked me if I would companion Karen through everything. And so for a year, I took her to healers and all different people. And it was just life-changing, soul-shaping, walking with her, seeing
Yeah.
how she moved from so much external identification of her existence to
Yeah.
inward,
Yeah.
to just embodying this light and love. And at the very end, she went into hospice, wasn't even quite a week. They had Fairview Hospice came in, and I just was in awe of the people,
Yeah.
and the whole experience was unbelievable. Karen said to me 2 days before she died, she said this to me and Scott, her son, out of nowhere. She looked at us and she said, "I'm going to teach you about death and dying, and I'm not afraid." It was just,
Wow.
we were sitting there and my mouth was almost on the ground thinking, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is a lot to witness.
Mm-hmm.
And she died within a couple of days. But from that experience, that was the inkling of, becoming a chaplain. And I
Yeah.
listened, and started
Choose
to
life
explore.
this time.
And I looked into hospice programs. And here's
Yeah.
the interesting thing. I got into all the major chaplaincy residency programs, and I kept hearing Fairview, U of M, Fairview. And that's where I was a patient as a child. And
Yeah.
I thought, you gotta be kidding me. Like, why would I go back there? And I did. I chose where I went back. But you know what? It was a whole deeper layer of healing that I went through, going back
Yeah.
to hospital where I was a child
Yeah.
patient.
And I believe that's why you went back when you had to go back. It's really interesting how the guidance of God when He's leading one to go choose life, choose death, and
Mhm.
uh, it's really a fascinating the wisdom of God. I think sometimes this morning I got up and I was just laying there looking and looking at my life and marveling at the wisdom of God in my life, how
Mhm.
things were moving. I was like, wow, that's brilliant. And I'm just having this conversation with God about that, how brilliant He was. I'm like, that is absolutely, and there I am, just enjoying this. And so here He brought you um, to deal with some other things that to polish you off. So because He knows that the area that you're going to be moving to, you needed some polishing off, and
Mhm.
so that you can take in all of what you're about to experience, because this is where people have learned how to shift their perspective from the natural world as they're beginning to walk into that next, they're on that bridge, and the shedding of the natural things begins. So here you are, you're um, front and center, Catherine, to see these honorable passageways and stuff like that. And I got a chance to listen to some of your YouTube pieces. I want you to talk about those things that you learned, because you were there for a while. You got a chance to see, and you saw patterns, you saw processes, and I know you have mentioned some that you had noticed that were prominent. Talk to them. Don't give them all of it. Just give them some so they can taste it, because I want them to buy that book. So talk to them about some of those things that you began to notice, having all of those people transitioning over, having conversation, began to look at them and see what becomes important, what is not necessary, all of those things. Invite us to some of those precious moments.
So the 13 years that I was a chaplain, I started at a long-term care center called Good Samaritan. Then I was at our level 1 trauma hospital, Hennepin County Medical Center. And then the last 8 years I was with Fairview Hospice, I'll tell you two takeaways that were just, I'll always carry them with me. One
Yeah.
is when people are in trauma, crisis, when they're at end of life, the number one theme I heard was all people wanted was love.
Yeah.
That's it. Love of their family, those closest to them. Nothing else mattered. Everything else dropped away. And it was such a deep learning on my part of just companioning them, witnessing, watching, walking with them, and learning even on a deeper level what it means to be alive, what love means, the importance of love. The other takeaway would be I experienced many people at end of life within days, weeks before they died, where there was just a deepening within them of the, and I would walk with them, helping them let go of regrets, any kind of forgiveness, whatever they
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
to process. But then a deepening of what it means to be here and fully alive in just this moment. And it was an awakening. It was just like a, this is it. This is what it
Yeah.
means to be alive, to be awake, to be fully here. And they would feel it and sense it. I could see it. I could see a glow within and around them. And then they would die.
Yeah. What did it do to you? What did all of that experience do to you personally?
It deepened within me from my childhood, from my couple experiences of looking at my own death. It deepened even that of
Yeah.
what it means to be alive right now, what it means. And the takeaway of you don't have to wait until you're about to die or you're in a crisis. You can choose it right now. And then the impetus of writing, I started writing, I started blog writing, and then the book. I mean, the book was a full of, and my book is all about what are you choosing? How are you choosing to live right now? And what are you choosing?
Yeah. That we started the podcast, and I hadn't used that in ever. Choose life, and I see how important it is. As we are taking little steps in our journey, if you will, of being here on this earth. The advice was given. He says, "I've laid out two choices. Choose life."
Mm-hmm.
And as we were talking about it, Catherine, I'm getting an even deeper insight as to what that meant. And there's a deeper meaning to that as we're moving through life and we have situations coming to us. If we choose life all the time, we will be on the right path, and we will know it because there's this disturbance within us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if one begins to meditate, quiet the self, we will get that direction of where life is versus where the death is. And in some cases it's clear, as others, some days it's not. But you have to be still in order for you to hear the answer. Here you are, you were witness to much. It has affected you much. Um, you started blogging, as you said, you invited that into your life. Blogging, writing, guys, is some of the most powerful tools, along with meditations and so forth, that you can bring into your life to assist you to become clear minded, if you will. It
Mm-hmm.
allows you to empty out and put in meditation, the breath. You get an opportunity to witness the breath when it comes to end of life. It is simply that. I've seen that. I've been there several times, and you'll see them, take the breath and they move from one space
Mm-hmm.
into the other. It's a very important practice that one has to do while you're alive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I actually, one of the things is ancient Japanese. I love all these little crazy things myself. And I studied a practice that the Japanese had where they would picture themselves dead and to walk through the emotions of that. And I remember practicing that in my life for many years. And what it made me do was appreciate life.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing what it did for me. So here
Yeah.
you are, you've learned to appreciate life and the moment of life. and the choice of the question as to what am I here, why am I here, and my life here, and so forth. When you began to formulate the book in your mind, what did it look like, Catherine, when you were putting those pages together? How did you get to the book?
Mhm.
What caused you to say, let me write a book?
And I want to share with you that 10 years prior, so this is around 2010 when I
Yeah.
was leaving the trauma hospital doing hospice work, I got a vision of the book. I saw it write a book. In fact, my kids remind me, and my husband, and my kids at that time were teenagers, but they remind me that I said, I'm going to write a book someday. Anyway, I said that to them and they were like, great. You're like, okay, great. Uh, yeah, it was funny, but now we look back and laugh at that. Um, so the blog writing helped just start writing. I felt this urge to start writing. And then 2020, when the pandemic started, I started to see how have I been organically living my life? And I came through these 5 ways, practices that have been part of my life for so much of my life. And I
Yeah,
started to see them. I started to see, oh, I can see these as chapters. And I just dived into writing. And here I had a full-time private practice. For me, I'm a night person.
yeah,
So say goodnight to my husband at 9, 10 o'clock. I would, every word I wrote in my book, I would pray, meditate before I started.
yeah.
And then I would sit at my computer and it would pour out of me for 3, 4 hours. I would just like,
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
so
I know about that.
I would write 10 to 15 hours a week.
Yeah. Wow.
And yeah, and within a year or so, year and a half, I had half my book written. So then I'm like, oh, publisher. So then it was just this path, how it all unfolded. But I feel like it was a calling to
Yeah.
write my book. It just poured through me. It wasn't actually that hard, but it was just like I had to write.
Yeah. The title. How did it come into you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I also have to share, I've worked with an amazing editor, her name Amy.
Hmm.
And she would guide me, she'd push me. I don't like this, I like that. What do you mean here? So that was
Yeah.
helpful. Sections. Between Amy and I, we came up with, what is it about? It's about awakening. It's about coming into your heart and soul. It just became very clear.
Yeah.
The title, Everyday Awakening, the subtitle, 5 practices for living fully, feeling deeply, and coming into your heart and soul. It was like, boom, that's it. That's the title.
That is awesome. And you guys that have been listening to this wonderful, powerful conversation, and Catherine mentioned the book Everyday Awakening and how it came about, and the principles that she has in there. And I suggest that you guys purchase the book, give it to friends. You have a couple of holidays coming up, and I'm sure there's birthdays in there as well, that you can offer these books. And I tell people, and because as an author myself, I know that the words that are written on those pages have power. It's how you approach the book. And so Jesus said it to some folks that were hanging around. He says, "Those who have ears, let them hear." And I remember as a kid that used to bother me. And then one day it hit me that there was a responsibility upon the hearer, the person that is listening and standing there. He or she has a responsibility to prepare, to be ready to hear. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
saw it, I was like, oh, wow, there's something there. And I remember that one must or there's a journey from listening to hearing. And when we become a hearer, it now lands into you and I. And when you prepare yourself before you read those books, you get yourself into a state where your theater mind, your brain waves are relaxed, and you begin to read. You'd be amazed at the power of those words and what they do once they launch into you. They will change your life and give you new purpose, new direction, and excitement, all of these different things that you will receive as a result of being and spending time with that book, because you're actually spending a private time with Catherine. You're having a conversation with her and she's talking to you. And that's what that book is. So purchase it, give it to friends, give it to family, hand it all out so that they can get to know who she is. She's been there, guys. She's seen death. She's familiar with it. She knows the power of the bridge, the breath, all of it. I got someone for you guys that are listening that need some help. And I'm going to provide all of Catherine's information so that you can have access to her and get into her world. Catherine, thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. This has been good stuff.
Thank you so much. Delightful to talk with you. I see your bright light. So thank you so much. Blessings to everyone.
Thank you so much.